Today's hearing with Pam Bondi proved disastrous as she not only embarrassed herself but also inadvertently implicated Kash Patel. Under pointed questioning from Thomas Massie regarding the alleged cover-up at the DOJ and FBI, Bondi appeared to falter significantly. The situation worsened when Jim Jordan intervened, seemingly exposing what some are characterizing as Patel's conflicting statements to Congress, further complicating matters for those involved in the controversy. We'll examine Jordan's involvement and what critics are calling hypocritical moments. But first, let's look at how Massie's questioning appeared to rattle Bondi and what implications this may have regarding Patel's previous congressional testimony.
Your perspective, why are you being excluded from this dinner?
Well, I've long learned that I'm not trying to get inside of the president's psyche. It's not a good use of my time. It's not lost to me that I'm the only black governor in this country, and I find that to be particularly painful, considering the fact that the president is trying to exclude me from an organization that not only my peers have asked me to help to lead, but then also a place where I know I belong in. And so I've long learned, and I've talked to the people and the children of my state, is that I'm never in a room because of someone's benevolence nor kindness.
The hearing revealed what critics are calling an unprecedented political scandal. Bondi's apparent difficulty in providing clear, consistent answers and the administration's seeming lack of a coherent messaging strategy left many observers stunned. The disjointed nature of the proceedings would likely concern any American watching, regardless of their political affiliation, raising serious questions about accountability and governance that transcend partisan lines. The situation became more complicated when Jim Jordan's interventions appeared to create additional problems. In one notable exchange, Jordan criticized hearing protesters, stating, "You have a right to protest in the street, but that doesn't give you a right to go into the Capitol and disrupt Congress." Given the events of January 6th, this statement struck many as ironic. Perhaps most significantly, Bulwark editor Sarah Longwell highlighted another Jordan statement. Rep. Jim Jordan rightfully suggested that those who lie to congressional committees should be indicted. Critics quickly pointed out that this principle, if applied consistently, could have serious implications for Kash Patel's previous testimony.
Bizarre weaponization guy at DOJ, Ed Martin, who calls himself Eagle Ed. Okay. He's the guy who's been in the lead on freeing all the January 6 prisoners and bringing these doomed, harebrained cases against people like Tish James and James Comey. Today, Ed Martin got stripped of his job titles and they moved his office out of Main Justice. You like your new broom closet, Eagle Ed? With that Texas special election this weekend, a place Trump won by 17 points, instead going to the Democrat by more than 14 points, a swing of over 30 points in the Democrats' direction in Texas. With Americans now telling pollsters by a 2-to-1 margin that Trump being back in office has made their life worse, not better. Trump has today told a right-wing podcaster, a guy he previously installed at the FBI for some reason, but who's now back to podcasting. Trump today told him that he wants Republicans to, quote, take over elections, meaning literally seizing the elections infrastructure all over the country. Okay. And his bizarro world seizure of ballots from Fulton County, Georgia, may be about to get nuked in court, as Fulton County today sued to stop him from doing anything with what they took. The Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office tonight is reportedly shedding another 8 federal prosecutors who are walking because they apparently cannot abide what the Trump administration is telling them to do in that city, with these bizarre and untenable attempts to investigate and prosecute the people Trump's agents killed there and their families, and protesters there, and journalists there. Georgia Fort, one of the Twin Cities journalists who they are trying to prosecute there, is going to join us here live tonight in just a moment. Tonight, the Trump administration has reportedly stood down the Alaska and North Carolina active duty troops they had previously told to prepare to deploy to Minnesota. Tonight, the New York Times reports that the Trump administration has even backed down on its demand to make Harvard University pay them millions of dollars.
The concerns about Kash Patel's testimony center on what critics argue were material misstatements rather than simple oversights. The assertion that a trafficking operation of this scale involved only 2 individuals strains credulity, particularly for an administration that emphasizes common sense in its messaging. From the outset, critics argue there has been a pattern of minimizing the scope of the Epstein network. This echoes language used by other officials, such as RFK Jr.'s casual dismissal of connections as merely bumping into everyone in social settings like New York or Palm Beach. However, the frequency and context of these associations raises legitimate questions that deserve serious investigation rather than casual explanations. According to Representative Robert Garcia's statements, these connections extended to Mar-a-Lago gatherings. When administration figures use similar explanatory language, characterizing encounters as coincidental social interactions, critics see this as an attempt to downplay the significance of documented relationships and the broader network's extent. The concern isn't merely about redacted documents, but about a narrative framework that critics believe seeks to minimize the full scope of what occurred and who was involved. This makes Bondi's unprepared and defensive performance at the hearing particularly striking. While Patel faced serious questions about the accuracy of his congressional testimony, which carries potential legal consequences, Bondi's combative approach may have paradoxically drawn more attention to the very issues the administration appears reluctant to address fully. Representative Jamie Raskin raised additional concerns during the hearing that further complicated the administration's position.
Just take a look around at where we are 1 year into this. Are they going to be able to build a huge, permanent archipelago of camps, of lawless prison camps? There's pushback everywhere, including in red states, red counties, and red cities, that says no. Are they going to be able to keep up their military-style invasion of U.S. cities? Minneapolis says no. And the whole country says no with them. Are they going to be able to arrest their way through their enemies and through the journalists they single out? No, they're not. They're going to try, but no, they're not. But it is.
This is an extraordinarily tense congressional hearing that raises several critical constitutional and ethical questions. What we're witnessing here is a carefully constructed legal argument that essentially backs the Attorney General into a corner. The questioner, who appears to be Rep. Jamie Raskin from Maryland, is building a sophisticated trap around the Domestic Emoluments Clause. He's pointing out something that sounds almost absurd, but is entirely real. The president is suing the ears for $10 billion, roughly 80% of their annual budget, over leaked tax returns. The constitutional problem is obvious. If the president settles this lawsuit, he would essentially be negotiating with himself to pay himself money beyond his salary. The president even acknowledged this absurdity himself, saying, "I'm the one that makes the deal. I kind of have to work it out with myself." What makes this questioning particularly sharp is the moral comparison he draws. He contrasts Trump's privacy violation tax returns being leaked, which was embarrassing and illegal, with the Epstein survivors whose names, phone numbers, and actual home addresses were apparently published, putting them in genuine physical danger. The rhetorical question is devastating. If embarrassment from a tax leak is worth $10 billion, what are these survivors' lives worth? The Attorney General's response is remarkable. First, he gives the standard "I'm not going to discuss pending litigation" line, which technically sidesteps the question but doesn't address the underlying constitutional issue. Then, something breaks down completely. The AG starts making personal attacks, throws out Trump derangement syndrome, asks condescending questions like, "Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is?" and basically refuses to follow the committee's procedural rules. From an analyst's perspective, this reveals several troubling things. When the nation's top law enforcement officer cannot maintain professional composure during questioning and resorts to personal attacks instead of legal arguments, it shows how deeply partisan our institutions have become. The constitutional question being raised is legitimate and serious. If a president can sue his own government and then settle with himself, we've entered territory the founders never imagined. The deflection is also telling. Rather than addressing the substance, the comparison between Trump's privacy claims versus Epstein survivors' far more serious violations, the AG goes on the attack personally. It's a classic defensive move when you don't have a good substantive answer. The mention of unitary executive theory is particularly important here. This theory gives the president extensive control over the executive branch. But it creates an impossible conflict when the president is simultaneously the plaintiff suing the government and the head of that same government. It's a logical paradox with real constitutional implications. What really stands out is the precedent issue. Apparently, no previous president in American history has repeatedly sued the federal government like this. We're in uncharted waters, and nobody seems to have a clear answer about whether this is even constitutionally permissible. The questioner's final observation is particularly damning. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before. This isn't coming from some random person. It's being said to the Attorney General, whose entire professional existence is supposed to be about understanding and enforcing rules. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like, drop a blue heart. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you.